Ever wondered how a single moment can change everything? What if I told you a hidden hero emerged from silence? Stay tuned as we unfold a story of resilience, unexpected revelations, and triumph against all odds. But first, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It's your support that helps keep these powerful stories coming your way. The moment Maria Davis stepped into the training room, the atmosphere shifted. Whispers filled the air, and all eyes turned to her, eyes that judged before they understood. Maria, scarred from years of combat, wasn't your typical instructor. At 40, she was a woman who had survived battles most could never imagine. Her face bore the marks of an IED explosion that had taken her team, but not her spirit. She didn't belong here. Not among these young, cocky recruits who hadn't seen a day of real combat. But that didn't stop her from walking into the room with the quiet confidence of someone who'd fought, lost, and still stood. As she took her seat, Captain John Harris, leaning back in his chair with a smug grin, broke the silence with mockery. "Hey, Maria, got too close to the fire again." His words, meant to sting, echoed in the room. The others snickered, feeding off his cruelty. Maria's hands tightened around her coffee cup, but she didn't react. She didn't need to. They didn't know who she was. They didn't know what she had survived. Instead of responding, Maria stood up with deliberate calm, gathering her things. The room grew silent as she turned and walked out, leaving a lingering tension in her wake. What they didn't know was that Maria wasn't just a teacher, she was a legend waiting to be revealed. As the days passed, the whispers about Maria Davis grew louder. No one knew what to make of the quiet, scarred instructor who had earned the right to be here, yet chose to remain silent. Maria wasn't just an instructor, she had a history that no one could understand. The woman who had walked past the young recruits with their mocking grins wasn't merely a figure to scoff at. Her past had shaped her into something much more formidable. At 18, Maria had left her small town in Nebraska, trading in her dreams of a normal life for the call of something bigger. The military had offered her an escape from a future steeped in poverty, but it gave her something far more valuable: purpose. What followed was 15 years of sacrifice, rising through ranks that often tried to break her. The scars on her face weren't just the result of one IED blast, they were a symbol of everything she'd survived. Her call sign, Widow 27, wasn't just a name chosen for drama. It was earned through precision and sacrifice. 27 confirmed kills across multiple missions that spanned the globe. She had been in combat zones most Americans would never even hear about, doing what was necessary to protect lives. But the scars, the ones people mocked, came later. They were from that fateful day in 2019, when a blast from an IED in the Afghan mountains took everything from her. Maria had been the only one to survive that attack, pulled from the wreckage of a burning vehicle, her body badly burned. But it wasn't the burns that haunted her, it was the loss of her fiancé, Marcus, and the memory of the explosion that claimed the lives of her entire unit. Maria wasn't here just to teach. She had buried medals in storage units and scrubbed her online presence clean. She had chosen a quiet life, trying to forget the ghosts that haunted her every step. But those ghosts were still alive, and the moment she stepped into that break room, they came rushing back. Yet, Maria stood firm, knowing that what she had lived through was far more than what any of these recruits could ever understand. They thought her scars were a joke. They thought they could break her with laughter. But what they didn't know was that Maria Davis had already conquered battles far bigger than anything they could imagine. It began with whispers, followed by snickers. As Maria entered the break room, the young recruits eyed her with judgment, their gaze lingering on the burn marks that marred her face like a map of trauma. Captain Derek Holt, the most vocal of the bunch, leaned back in his chair, a smirk tugging at his lips as he looked her way. "Fire drill again, Maria," he mocked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. The others burst into laughter, but Maria didn't flinch. The taunting didn't stop there. Holt, clearly reveling in his power over someone he deemed less than, continued. "Looks like someone got too close to the grill," he said, his finger tracing along his own smooth face, mimicking the path of her scars. The room erupted in laughter again, feeding off Maria's silence. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't raise her voice. Her body remained still, but the tension in her jaw spoke volumes. Then, without warning, she stood up, her gaze fixed on her plate. She didn't say a word. The room fell silent. Maria didn't need to speak. With quiet dignity, she walked out of the room, leaving behind only the stares of the recruits. It wasn't her silence that made them uneasy, it was the confidence in her movements, the poise in the way she carried herself. What they had mocked as weakness, Maria had turned into strength. What was once mockery now became respect. Maria Davis had spent years hiding from the world, but her past was about to catch up with her in ways no one could have imagined. The story of Maria's past had always been a mystery. The recruits and even the higher-ups at the academy couldn't understand why she remained in the shadows. A top-tier special operations agent turned basic firearms instructor. It didn't make sense. But as her story slowly started to unravel, so did the prejudices that had formed around her. Maria had never chosen the limelight. After surviving the horrors of Afghanistan, she had left behind a life of medals and glory to serve in silence. Yet, every day she stood in front of new recruits, she secretly carried the weight of those she lost, the faces of her fallen comrades burned into her mind. The burned scars were the least of her trauma. She had spent years masking the horror, the nightmares, and the grief. It was during a routine day that General Harrison entered the academy for a surprise inspection. Her sharp eyes immediately honed in on Maria, who stood quietly in the back row of instructors. Unlike the others, Maria didn't try to draw attention to herself. But as Harrison watched her, something clicked. She recognized the posture, the quiet discipline that spoke volumes. This was no ordinary instructor. Harrison had seen it before. The general's eyes softened as she made the connection, and she made a mental note to investigate further. Later that day, the routine inspection turned into a moment of revelation. When it was Maria's turn to demonstrate her marksmanship, the room held its breath. The precision in her shots was impeccable, beyond the skill expected of an ordinary instructor. Harrison's suspicion was confirmed. Widow 27 had returned, not as a legend, but as a quiet, unassuming teacher who had no desire to be recognized. However, her past was about to be unveiled in a way no one could ignore. Part 5, The Unveiling. It was a moment frozen in time. The room, once filled with mockery and disrespect, now stood at attention, witnessing the silent power that Maria Davis possessed. As General Harrison stepped closer to Maria, her gaze never wavered. The room was silent, only the soft hum of the fluorescent lights above could be heard. Harrison, her eyes intense with recognition, approached the scarred woman with reverence that caught everyone off guard. With a simple gesture, the general asked Maria to step forward. No one spoke. No one moved. It wasn't just the general's presence that silenced the room, it was Maria's quiet strength. The camera focused on Harrison's eyes as they narrowed, almost searching for something deep within Maria's composure. And then it clicked. Widow 27, she whispered. The words hung in the air, heavy with history. Every instructor in the room was taken aback, and for a brief moment, Maria's carefully concealed identity as a former elite operative began to unravel. General Harrison had been looking for Maria for years. The Pentagon had long considered her to be killed in action, after the tragic IED attack in Kandahar, but Harrison knew there was something off about that report. She had heard stories. Rumors of the most lethal female operator in Special Forces history, and now, here she was, standing in front of her, a shadow of her former self. "What the hell are you doing here, Mitchell?" Harrison's voice was a mixture of admiration and disbelief. "I've been trying to award you the Medal of Honor posthumously for 2 years. You saved hundreds of lives, including those children in Afghanistan. You went back into the fire when your whole unit was gone. Do you even know what you've done for this country? Maria's heart clenched at the words she never wanted to hear. She had been trying to bury her past, to fade into a quiet life where the scars of war wouldn't define her. But now, the weight of her past, of her sacrifices, was being exposed for everyone to see. Instead of basking in the attention or demanding recognition, Maria remained silent. She looked at Harrison, her expression one of quiet resolution. I'm just an instructor now, General. I don't need accolades or medals. I'm here to teach. That's all I want. But Harrison wasn't done. You've earned every bit of recognition. You owe it to yourself and those you lost to stand tall. And just like that, Maria's world began to shift once again. Between the silent admiration of the recruits and the respect of her superiors, she found herself faced with a decision that would change everything. One word, one action, could change everything. Maria had been hiding in plain sight for far too long, but now, the moment of truth was at hand. The room was still. General Harrison's commanding presence loomed over the assembled instructors, and all eyes were on Maria. The tension was palpable as Harrison addressed the group. I want you to show them what real marksmanship looks like, Mitchell. A simple request. But to Maria, it was a challenge to prove that her quiet strength was more than just a facade. She stood tall, walking toward the range, the weight of the moment not lost on her. The group's skepticism hung in the air like a cloud. Could this scarred woman really be the elite operative she once was? Maria grabbed the rifle, and as soon as her fingers wrapped around the stock, something inside her clicked. The years of muscle memory came rushing back. Every adjustment, every breath, was instinctive. No hesitation. No thought. Just pure precision. One by one, she fired. The sound of the shots echoed through the range, but the real shock came when the targets fell, perfectly. Each shot, a clean hit, dead center. The tension in the room dissolved, replaced by astonished silence. As Maria moved to further distances, 300 yards, 400, 500, each shot hit its mark with an almost eerie precision. This wasn't just basic marksmanship, this was combat-level accuracy, honed by years of life-and-death situations. The young instructors, who once mocked her scars, now stood frozen, their faces pale. Even Captain Derek Holt, who had led the mockery, was stunned. But it wasn't just the precision that floored them, it was the confidence. The quiet, unyielding resolve that she displayed in each movement. As Maria lowered the rifle, General Harrison's voice cut through the silence, loud and commanding. This is Sarah Mitchell, widow 27. 27 confirmed high-value targets eliminated. Her intelligence work saved over 1,200 American lives. And those scars? Harrison gestured to Maria's face, now lit by the setting sun. They earned her the right to be here. To be respected. The respect in the room was instant. The reputation of Maria, once a silent shadow, had been forever cemented. But she didn't need their admiration. What mattered most was the quiet satisfaction of knowing that her sacrifices had not been in vain. Maria had been hiding in plain sight. But now, the truth about her past was revealed, and the room was silent with awe. As General Harrison stood beside Maria, she noticed a shift in the room. The instructors who had once mocked her now stood still, eyes wide, as Harrison spoke of her past, of the lives saved and the sacrifices made. For the first time, Maria felt seen, not just as an instructor, but as the elite operative she had been. The mockery that once fueled her isolation turned to regret as Harrison's words cut through the air, widow 27, 27 confirmed high-value targets eliminated. Over 1,200 lives saved. The other instructors, once dismissive, now saw Maria for who she truly was. But Maria stayed silent, her heart heavy with memories of her fallen team. Instead of basking in the moment, Maria kept her focus on the task at hand. She wasn't here for recognition, she was here to teach. And teach, she did. With grace and precision, she guided the recruits, sharing wisdom without fanfare. Her calm demeanor spoke volumes more than words ever could. General Harrison extended an offer to Maria, to lead advanced training, to take on a role of greater influence. But Maria declined. "I'm here for the basics," she said quietly. And so, she returned to the range, her influence growing not through fame, but through the quiet strength of her teaching. The respect she had earned spoke louder than any title. Maria's true power wasn't in the medals she never wore, but in the quiet, steadfast guidance she gave to every recruit she taught. Maria continued teaching with the same dedication she had always shown. As the months passed, her influence spread. The academy transformed from a place of mockery to one of respect. In the classrooms, the students who had once dismissed her now turned to her for guidance. Her methods became legendary, not for the flashy stories, but for the real, hard-earned knowledge that she imparted. The students began to score higher than ever before. They understood the importance of competence over arrogance, survival over glory. And as they learned, Maria saw the faces of her fallen comrades in their eyes. Each student carrying forward the lessons she had learned through loss and sacrifice. One recruit, Anna, came to Maria with a simple question: "What's the most important thing to remember in combat?" Maria's response was simple: "Strength is in being ready, not being seen." Anna nodded, understanding more than just the words. It was a lesson that would carry her through her first deployment. And as Maria watched her walk away, she knew that she had prepared one more warrior to come home safe. Maria had lived through the worst of times, but now, it was her quiet strength that would change the academy forever. The academy's transformation wasn't immediate, but it was unmistakable. As weeks passed, Maria's way of teaching became the gold standard. The atmosphere shifted. Instructors who had once mocked her now watched her with quiet respect. It wasn't about her past, it was about her presence, her commitment to the future of these recruits. One afternoon, General Harrison visited to see the progress firsthand. As Maria led a demonstration, her calm, steady hands guiding a young recruit, Harrison noticed something new: a group of veterans in the back, watching in awe. They had seen it before, in combat zones across the world, but they hadn't seen it here, in the heart of an academy that had once been driven by ego. The change was palpable, and it didn't take long for even the toughest of instructors to take notice. The mockery was gone, replaced by silent admiration. Students no longer whispered behind Maria's back. They leaned in, listening to every word. The veterans' wisdom didn't need applause, it was shown in the way her students carried themselves. The moment wasn't dramatic. It wasn't flashy. It was simply the recognition that Maria's lessons were more than about shooting. They were about surviving. Maria had become the heart of the academy, not because she sought it, but because her strength had spoken louder than any words could. She had transformed not only the recruits but the academy itself. Maria had found her purpose again, not in the headlines or medals, but in shaping the future of soldiers who would carry her legacy. It had been a year since the incident with General Harrison, and Maria's impact was undeniable. The academy had become a place of respect and real training. Students who had once been selfish or boastful now focused on unity and survival. They understood, thanks to Maria, that true strength wasn't in being loud, but in being prepared. In a small moment of reflection, Maria sat in her modest apartment, staring at the picture of her fallen team. The photograph of Alpha Team, smiling in defiance of their final mission. 6 faces, now frozen in time. She had survived, but the memory of them, Marcus, Rodriguez, Kowalski, and the others, was the fire that kept her going. Maria's influence spread far beyond the academy's walls. Recruit after recruit returned from deployments with stories of how her teachings had saved their lives. She had become a mentor, not because of her scars, but because of her quiet, unwavering dedication to their success. And when she returned to the range, every student saw something different. A woman who had been through hell, but who had never let it define her. Her students were ready, not just for the next fight, but for life. Maria had found her peace, not in recognition, but in the steady, quiet work of teaching the next generation how to survive and come home. The academy had been forever changed, but Maria's influence stretched far beyond the classroom. As the months passed, Maria's teachings began to shape more than just her students. Other instructors took note of the calm, effective leadership she exhibited. Soon, they began to adopt her methods. No more boastful stories of combat, no more belittling the inexperienced recruits. It was all about preparation, discipline, and respect. In the staff meetings, the conversation shifted. No longer were tactics discussed in the context of one-upmanship, but in terms of teamwork and survival. The mockery that had once permeated the air now felt out of place. The change was small, but it was steady, like a river carving out a canyon. The hardest warriors began to soften, recognizing that Maria's quiet strength was something worth emulating. Maria never spoke about her past. She never flaunted her past operations, nor did she seek accolades. Yet, the respect she had earned spoke volumes. She wasn't a hero to be celebrated in the media, but a guide for the future of soldiers. And her impact was evident in the academy's transformation. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But the academy was now producing soldiers who understood that strength came not from the gun in their hands, but from the heart and mind that guided them. Maria's purpose, once clouded by loss, was now clear, to prepare soldiers who could face the world and survive, just as she had. The quietest moments often leave the loudest echoes. Maria's legacy had only just begun. As Sarah stepped away from the military world, she realized that she had built something more important than she ever expected. Her students, many of whom once doubted her, had now adopted her principles. They were taking what she had taught them and passing it on, creating a chain reaction that reached every corner of the academy. But Sarah wasn't looking for recognition, she was looking for the future of soldiers who could handle what was coming. One rainy morning, a former student walked up to Sarah, holding a small note in his hand. He had been on a deployment where things had gone south quickly, but Sarah's lessons had stayed with him. It was through those lessons, about leverage, position, and having the right mindset, that he and his team had survived. He had one simple message: thank you. Sarah knew that these small victories, these quiet acknowledgments, were her true reward. They were her medal of honor. The letters, the emails, the thank yous. They weren't the reason she did it, but they were the proof that she had made a difference. As Sarah looked at the note, she felt the weight of it settle in her chest. She didn't need public recognition. Her legacy was written in the lives saved, in the warriors she had shaped, and in the stories shared quietly among those who knew what it meant to survive. Her work was done, but her impact would live on in the next generation, continuing her fight without a spotlight. Behind the closed doors of the academy, the real battles were fought, not with weapons, but with patience and understanding. Sarah's influence reached those who were willing to listen. While some still mocked her scars, they couldn't deny the results. Her students were becoming better prepared, more resilient, and more focused. They respected her not for her past, but for the steady guidance she provided each day. As the academy grew, the atmosphere changed. Instructors now shared tactics and experiences, not to boast, but to teach. The selfishness and bravado that once plagued their training sessions faded. Even those who had once dismissed Sarah began to acknowledge her mastery, though none dared ask for her secrets. One morning, Sarah saw a familiar face among the recruits. It was Anna, the young woman who had once struggled to carry her rifle. Now, she stood confidently, rifle in hand, ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. Anna approached Sarah after the session, her voice soft. "I remember what you taught me about strength, about being ready. It's not just about the weapon." Sarah nodded, seeing the change not just in her, but in the entire academy. Sarah's work had become more than lessons on the range, it had become a way of life. The recruits now learned that true strength wasn't about dominance, it was about respect, survival, and self-awareness. Sarah had taught them not just to shoot, but to live with integrity and purpose. And that was the most important lesson of all. In life, true strength doesn't come from how loudly we speak or how much we boast, but from the quiet resilience to endure hardship and help others along the way. It's about rising above mockery and judgment, staying true to your values, and leading by example. The greatest victories are often those unseen by the world, lived out in small, quiet moments. Embrace humility, build others up, and recognize that the most meaningful impact is often in the lives we touch and the wisdom we share. If you resonate with this, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to support the channel.